Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Do you remember this from last year? This is Middle East Eye. Israelis practice Red Heifer ritual in front of Al-Aqsa Mosque. And as you can see, they didn't actually burn a heifer, they just had this cut out, and I don't know what else they did. But you have a KOHEN there, which is a Jewish priest, and they were talking about things. And as you know, I've been following this for a while on the channel because this group, the Temple Institute, along with others, but it's primarily the Temple Institute, they're very serious about preparing for the Third Temple. And as they try and do these things, I don't know how it's going to play into end times prophecy. I don't know that this has to happen for the Third Temple. We've talked about the Third Temple a lot, or the Temple of Jerusalem. There's different theories. We don't have anything very concrete that says exactly what it's going to look like, how it's going to go. But this could play into it. And on top of that, we know that Hamas and Hezbollah have been upset about the Temple Institute importing red heifers from Texas, and that exacerbated things. It's actually within a year from the time that they imported those heifers that they launched their attack on October 7th. And so they're really keeping their eye on this, because this is one of the main things that they have to do in Judaism to prepare for the temple, because right now all Jews are in a state of ritual impurity, and they need the ashes of the red heifer to purify themselves in order to perform the temple services. Not all of them. According to Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, who I've interviewed before, he said that there's some that could be done, but for everything that they would do on the temple, they need the ashes of the red heifer first. So this is kind of a big deal if they successfully get these ashes. So we had this practice last year, and then it looks like this month, I don't have an exact date, they did an actual rehearsal. This is from 7 Israel National News, and I have this blocked out right here, but I'll put a link for this in the description box below if you want to see this article and watch the video. Watch, biblical red heifer ritual comes to life in rehearsal ceremony. A red heifer raised in Israel, so this is not one of the Texas ones. A red heifer raised in Israel was disqualified for service after 2 black hairs were found on its body. It was used in a practice burning ceremony for priests. So this is just one more step forward. And, you know, it's hard to say how it's going to go, but I feel like the next time we get any news about this, it will be that they're doing the actual thing. It really feels like they're getting super, super close. I have more to say about this, but I want to point out, I first heard about this from The Haystack, so make sure to subscribe to him. It looks like he did a video about it. I'll put a link for his channel in the description box below. And then I got this email. This is from Colton Walters. Subject line, Red Heifer, Bruce R. McConkie, Prelude to the Second Coming, Restitution of All Things. Good morning, Jared. I don't know if you've seen this. Maybe you've already covered it and I missed it. You put out a lot of videos. Sometimes I get behind, and I don't blame you. I don't expect anybody to watch all my videos, but I do 1 a day. Sometimes I do 2 in a day if there's breaking news. And then there's a link. And then he says, ironically, the very same day I saw this article on Facebook, I was reading about the return of blood sacrifice in Bruce R. McConkie's The Mortal Messiah Volume 1. In it, he mentions blood sacrifice being brought back for a short period to fulfill a restitution of all things. If you have the book, he goes into more detail about the symbolism of the red heifer, specifically on page 136. If you don't have the book, I want to read more about it, I will take pictures and send them back over to you. Well, thank you for that, Colton, and thanks for the email. It looks like it is on archive.org. This is a free online library, so I'll put a link for this in the description box below if anybody else wants to check it out. Yeah, so what we're going to do, I want to talk about this idea of blood sacrifice being brought back. Some of you may not know that, especially if you're new to the channel, but we've talked about this a number of times. A lot of people think that blood sacrifice is a thing of the past, that it only applies to the law of Moses. Christ came and with his sacrifice, there's no more need for blood sacrifice. And that's actually wrong. And what I'm about to read to you, this is a new quote that I'm adding to my spreadsheet. Quotes A through Z. I have a row for blood sacrifice, and we're going to review some of that. And then we're going to look at the red heifers again and what's going on right now with the Temple Institute and how things have progressed. It's really crazy. Okay, so the mortal Messiah. It was during this American ministry that our Lord instituted in the New World, as he had done in Jerusalem and the Old World, the sacramental ordinance in which broken bread was eaten in remembrance of his body, and wine was drunk in remembrance of his blood. From that blessed day onward, the sacrament replaced sacrifices, except that as part of the restitution of all things, and then, and here's the part right here, and then, on a limited basis only, blood sacrifices will be offered again. It was of these future sacrificial ordinances that Malachi prophesied in a setting descriptive of the second coming of the Son of Man, that the returning Lord would purify the sons of Levi, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Of this offering to be made in Judah and Jerusalem. So this is a new bit of information right here, because I'm going to show you some other quotes about this that suggest that these blood sacrifices, these animal sacrifices, would actually be done here in the New Jerusalem. But Bruce R. McConkie is talking about by Judah in Jerusalem. So whenever I have conflicting things, I just keep my mind open. You know, somebody's right, or maybe both of them could be right. Maybe it's not just going to be in Jerusalem. Maybe it'll be here in New Jerusalem too. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Of this offering to be made in Judah, in Jerusalem, the prophecy says, it shall be pleasant unto the Lord in the days of old, as in the days of old, as in former years. Malachi 3, 1 through 5. So I'm going to end it right there, and let's go ahead and move on. Really quick, I want to read that other part that Colton mentioned, where he talks about the symbolism of the red heifer. So this is page 136. One rare and unusual sin offering must be noted. It was of a red heifer, one pure in color, upon which never came yoke, and it was to cleanse any in Israel from Levitical defilement, from defilement by the dead. The chief thing distinguishing it from all other sacrifices was that it was a sacrifice offered once for all, at least so long as the ashes lasted. That its blood was sprinkled not on the altar, but outside the camp towards the sanctuary, in that it was wholly burnt along with cedar wood as the symbol of imperishable existence, with hyssop or hyssop as that of purification from corruption, and with scarlet, from which from its color was the emblem of life. Thus the sacrifice of highest life, brought as a sin offering, and so far as possible once for all, was in its turn accompanied by the symbols of imperishable existence, freedom from corruption, and fullness of life, so as yet more to intensify its significance. But even this is not all. The gathered ashes with running water were sprinkled on the 3rd and 7th days on that which was to be purified. Assuredly, if death meant the wages of sin, this purification pointed in all its details to the gift of God, which is eternal life through the sacrifice of him in whom is the fullness of life. Okay, that was kind of a mouthful, but it represents Christ. Of course, all these different sacrifices represent Christ, but this one is a really poignant one. And then I happened to, as I was looking for any other news outlets that might be talking about what just happened with this practice run of the red heifer, I came across this New Jerusalem post. Your investments, the red heifer in planning for weddings, opinion. That caught my eye because weddings, or the marriage feast, the bridegroom and all that in the Bible, usually these are in the form of parables pointing to the second coming. And so now that's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about actual weddings. and how the red heifer is similar to marriage. So I'm just going to read a portion of this. In this week's Torah portion, Chukat, we read about, this is like their come follow me in Judaism that they've been doing for, I guess, thousands of years. In this week's Torah portion, Chukat, we read about the incomprehensible decree of the red heifer. When one has become defiled due to contact with a corpse, purity can be regained by being sprinkled with water that has the ashes of the red heifer mixed in. It is perplexing, to say the least. Rabbi Moshe Bogomilsky cites an interpretation from the Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Quote, "The laws concerning the red heifer are paradoxical. On the one hand, when the mixture is sprinkled on the defiled person, he becomes cleansed. On the other hand, those who are involved in the preparation of the red heifer become defiled. The priests appointed to prepare the red heifer may rationally argue, why should we become defiled for the sake of those who were not careful to avoid contact with a corpse?" So you could say that's something that Christ would say. Now, he would never say that, but Christ lived a sinless life. He was not defiled with sin. In and of himself, he was able to walk back into the presence of the Father. And when he performed the atonement, he didn't sin, he didn't become defiled, but he did experience all of our lives and all of our sins and paid for all of our sins and took upon him all of our infirmities and all that stuff when he didn't have to. He didn't have to. He paid for our defilement. So it's almost like he is the priest. And, this is from a Jewish point of view because you come in contact with something that's dead and then you become defiled, which the symbolism, there's more that's said in the Institute student manual, how it's like when you come in contact with a corpse and you're defiled, the symbolism is, basically coming in contact with sin, how sin brings upon you spiritual death. We're all spiritually dead, right? And we need Christ to remove that. So you understand the symbolism here. Okay, he continues. Hence, it could be said that the statute of the red heifer teaches that a Jew must help another Jew, even if it requires sacrifice. This is Chukat HaTorah, a basic principle of Torah. And though we may not easily comprehend it, we must practice it in our daily lives. It goes without saying that the essence of marriage is giving to the other, not just when you will benefit, but even when it involves sacrifice. And then it goes on. Okay, so now in regards to these red heifers being burned by the Jews in this ceremony, I'm not sure I would go so far as to say that this itself, the red heifers, would be the restoration of blood sacrifice, simply because this was part of the law of Moses. And sacrifice actually goes all the way back to Adam. And this is specifically a law of Moses type thing. If you go to Numbers 19, verses 1 and 2, it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord hath commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke." So it could be, for all I know. It's just that I don't think that any aspect that's specific to the law of Moses is going to be restored. But like I said, animal sacrifice is not exclusive to the law of Moses. And I think that's another mistake that a lot of people make. They think that the law of Moses, they always think about animal sacrifice, but no, animal sacrifice was taking place before the law of Moses. Now let's go to my spreadsheet, quotes A through Z, what's currently row 35 for animal sacrifice, restoration of. We have this from Joseph Smith. You can find this in the Young Women's Journal, March 1893. Sayings of the Prophet Joseph Smith. I heard the prophet reply to a question that was asked him by someone of a small company of brethren who had gathered in his office. And as usual, the class of men generally around him were unceasingly calling for information from his boundless treasure field. And his answer was this, quote, "Yes, there will. For there was never any rites, ordinances, or laws in the priesthood of any gospel dispensation upon the earth, but what will have to be finished and perfected in this, the last dispensation of time, the dispensation of all dispensations." End quote. This answer was given to a question upon sacrifices and burnt offerings, such as Israel in the days of Moses performed. So I don't know, that's talking about the law of Moses, upon which the conversation of the company had been. And this answer was to the question, will there ever be any more offering of sheep and heifers and bullocks upon altars as used to be required of Israel? Oh, well, they mentioned heifers here. And I think when it comes to heifers, the only one would be the red heifer. You do have bulls or bullocks that are burnt, for example, during the Feast of Tabernacles for the nations. But anyway, so we have that from Joseph Smith. We also have this one. This is in History of the Church, Volume 4, pages 211 to 212. This is Joseph Smith. It will be necessary here to make a few observations on the doctrine set forth in the above quotation, and it is generally supposed that sacrifice was entirely done away when the great sacrifice, i.e. the sacrifice of the Lord Jesus, was offered up, in that there will be no necessity for the ordinance of sacrifice in the future. But those who assert this are certainly not acquainted with the duties, privileges, and authority of the priesthood or with the prophets. The offering of sacrifice has ever been connected and forms a part of the duties of the priesthood. It began with the priesthood and will continue until after the coming of Christ. You hear that? So sacrifice, blood sacrifice, not just in the lead up to the second coming. I don't know if it'll even take place in the lead up. I don't know. But after he comes. It began with the priesthood and will continue until after the coming of Christ, from generation to generation. So that suggests a long time. We frequently have mention made of the offering of sacrifice by the servants of the Most High in ancient days prior to the law of Moses, which ordinances will be continued when the priesthood is restored with all its authority, power, and blessings. Elijah was the last prophet that held the keys of the priesthood and who will be... Well, I'm going to skip down. I'm going to go down to this one right here. But you can pause and read the rest of it. These sacrifices, as well as every ordinance belonging to the priesthood, will, when the temple of the Lord shall be built and the sons of Levi be purified, be fully restored and attended to in all their powers, ramifications, and blessings. This ever did and ever will exist when the powers of the Melchizedek priesthood are sufficiently manifest. Else how can the restitution of all things spoken of by the holy prophets be brought to pass? It is not to be understood that the law of Moses will be established again, with all its rites and variety of ceremonies. So see, here's the part right here. So I guess he does specify it's not law of Moses stuff, of which the red heifer would be a part. But continuing, this has never been spoken of by the prophets, but those things which existed prior to Moses' day, namely sacrifice, will be continued. It may be asked by some, what necessity for sacrifice since the great sacrifice was offered? In answer to which, if repentance, baptism, and faith existed prior to the days of Christ, what necessity for them since that time? The priesthood has descended in a regular line from father to son through their succeeding generations. Okay, but there's a few more I want to share with you. We have this from President Brigham Young, at the time president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. You can find it in these two places right here. He says, when we see a temple built right, there will be a place for the priests to enter and put on their robes and offer up sacrifices, first for themselves and then for the people. So that's interesting. We have another one from President Brigham Young. Okay, you can find this on the Wilford Woodruff Papers website. And it says, under the pulpit in the west end will be a place to offer sacrifices. There will be an altar prepared for that purpose so that when any sacrifices are to be offered, they should be offered here. Now, this one's a little bit confusing because if it's inside, because I don't know if at this point they're talking about Kirtland Temple style temple or something like that. But if you have an altar underneath a pulpit, I'm not sure if it would be big enough for something like a cow. But let me go over here to Wilford Woodruff Papers. You can find it in this journal. And I swear when I first found this, I swear that they didn't have this redacted right here. I think it was like a floor plan for where to show you where the altar would be in relation to the pulpit and the rest of the room. But this is where you find it. Okay. So they actually were talking about having this in our modern day temples, but it never came to fruition, at least not yet, and not in the temples that we're currently building. Okay, back here, let's see. We got this from President Joseph Fielding Smith, at the time president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, Doctrines of Salvation, Volume 3, page 511. Offering of the sons of Levi. What kind of offering will the sons of Levi make to fulfill the words of Malachi and John? Logically, such a sacrifice as they were authorized to make in the days of their former ministry when they were first called. Will such a sacrifice be offered in the temple? Evidently, not in any temple as they are constructed for work of salvation and exaltation today. It should be remembered that the great temple, which is yet to be built in the city Zion, will not be one edifice, but 12. And again, the original plan was 24, but I have a couple quotes talking about there just being 12. So it's kind of confusing. But when you take it all together, it does seem like there's supposed to be the 24 temple complex here in Independence, Missouri. And then there's also talk of a 25th temple, like the 25th temple being the great temple. I'm not going to go over all that right now, but okay. Some of these temples will be for the lesser priesthood. When these temples are built, it is very likely that provision will be made for some ceremonies and ordinances which may be performed by the Aaronic priesthood in a place provided where the sons of Levi may offer their offering in righteousness. This will have to be the case because all things are to be restored. And then, yeah, I'm going to move on from that, but you can pause and read the rest of it if you'd like. And I think that's pretty much it. I do have this. I have another row for Levi, purifying the sons of Levi and offering again purifying the sons of Levi and offering again in righteousness. So I have some of the same quotes here, but I also have scriptures. There's a number of different scriptures that talk about the sons of Levi offering again in righteousness. And unfortunately, I think a lot of members of the church, they think, well, look, the Aaronic priesthood has been restored and we go to the temple and, we have this new type of sacrifice, the sacrifice of a broken heart and contrite spirit. And we do these things in the temple. And that is true, but it's also it's literally also animal sacrifice. If you go to the Doctrine and Covenants student manual, this is on page 319. It says, historically, the sons of Levi, including the sons of Aaron and the sons of Moses, were the custodians of the house of God and were responsible for its ordinances. Today, the Lord promises that men who are called by the Lord to build up my church and who are faithful unto the obtaining of these two priesthoods of which I have spoken and the magnifying of their calling, become the sons of Moses and of Aaron. The Aaronic priesthood is responsible for the preparatory gospel. In the ordinances of the Melchizedek priesthood, including temple work, the power of godliness is manifest. As righteous saints serve the Lord in holy ordinances, including those in the temple, the sacrifice they offer through their service will be part, And that's the key right there. Part of the offering in righteousness that the sons of Levi, including the sons of Moses and Aaron, will present to the Lord before his coming. So we need to take note of that. And then I've added this quote that we just read from the Mortal Messiah. I've added this to my row for Jerusalem, future Jerusalem temple, because in that quote he talks about this sacrifice taking place in Jerusalem. So, okay, let's move on from that. Lastly, what I want to do is point you to this spreadsheet that I have called Judaism Temple Preparation. And there have been so many things that they've been doing to prepare for the third temple. And you have to realize that this isn't all of Judaism. You have the different like branches, sects of Judaism. They view themselves as one big tribe, and that's true, but they do have sects, essentially. So, for example, you think about Reform Jews or conservative Jews or Reconstructionist Jews. They don't believe that there has to be a third temple. They don't. In fact, Reform Jews, from everything that I've studied, a lot of them don't necessarily believe that the Bible is historic or like a historical account. They still want to retain their Jewish identity, but they've like really distanced themselves from the rest of Judaism. So it's not like all Jews accept this. And even within Orthodox Judaism, I'm not sure that they would accept everything that the Temple Institute is doing. I'm not sure, but that's just the sense that I get from everyone I've talked to and everything that I've studied so far. But you do have this group, primarily led by the Temple Institute, that are doing all these things to try and make the third temple a reality. Not the least of which is the red heifer, which is really hard to do because you have to have a perfectly red heifer. Not more than 2 hairs can be anything other than red. And there's all those other requirements. It cannot have been yoked or put to work. It can't have any blemish. So if it ever had an ear tag, which ranchers usually do, they have ear tags for cows, that disqualifies it. So what I did, this is new, I've added column I for red heifer so you can easily see developments with the red heifer. My other 2 columns are reenactments and new altar, because by my count, they've constructed 4 different altars for the temple, and these are portable altars that can be disassembled and reassembled quickly up on the Temple Mount. Okay, so red heifer. I'm not going to read from here. Actually, I am for this one. So the first development that I have is this one. Announcement of compiling a list of Jewish priests who will be eligible to prepare the red heifer and serve in the temple. The announcement coincides with the weekly Torah reading that describes the preparation of the red heifer. And then here's my sources over here. This one is from Israel 365 News, and it's by Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. I just want to point out, he knows the people at the Temple Institute. He's friends with them. If anybody knows what's going on with the red heifers, he does, and I've talked to him. This is an interview that I did just a couple months ago. This is May 1st, and he answered just all the questions that I had. And I want to point out really quick, at the 43-minute and 13-second mark, he said, "Until now, it's been very clear and obvious to anyone who sees the cows that they're not entirely red." So, and then he goes on. So he talks about the fact that at least as of May, with those heifers that they have from Texas, none of them are qualified right now. And if you go there, it's very clear if you just look at them. So they've had hairs that have changed colors, and I guess so much so that anybody can just pick up on that and notice that. I'll put a link for this in the description box below. I've talked to him from time to time about this and other things too. this was a really interesting conversation where we didn't just talk about the red heifers, but we talked about what he called signposts. How in Judaism, they feel like they're seeing a lot of signs of the imminent coming of Messiah. And like I've said before, I think that the Lord is working with them and preparing them for Messiah to come and for the second coming. So I like to stay in contact with him. Okay, so you had that registry of Jewish priests called KOHENim, that's plural. And then here's the next development. From Texas to Israel, red heifers needed for temple arrive. This was back in September of 2022. Like I said, within a year, that's when Hamas attacked. And on the 100th day of the war, they mentioned the fact that the red heifers were brought to Israel, so they're upset about it. Hezbollah has also talked about the red heifers. Not that this is the only reason that they attacked, but it may have been the straw that broke the camel's back, frankly. I kind of think that it was, because after this happened in 2023, there was a skirmish up on the Temple Mount, which, not that has been uncommon, but it was particularly bad in 2023, and I think it was because of this. And then there was a big rocket attack by Hamas. After that, it was after the time of Passover and Ramadan. And then later that year, you had that attack on October 7th. Okay, so we have this. Now, after that happened, there was a time when there weren't a whole lot of things coming out in the news about the red heifers. It was actually unclear exactly how old they were, because they have to be more than 2 years old. They have to be 2 years and 1 day old. They have to be in their third year of life. So you start that the day after their second birthday. And I put together this spreadsheet trying to figure out, how many there were, because I noticed all these things being said that suggested that there was not just the 5, but there was another one that came from, I can't remember at this point, also from Texas or somewhere else. And there were different ages that were being talked about in these different articles and videos. So I tried to figure it out. At this point, the ones from Texas and all the ones that have been talked about in these articles, they are now all of age. So that's not an issue, but that was another limitation. And then this came out. Let's see, this was April 3rd of 2024. So there was not a whole lot of news in 2023, but then in 2024, and this was just a few days before I talked to Adam last year, and we talked about the red heifers. He told me that if anybody had asked him if the red heifer ceremony was going to take place anytime soon, he would say absolutely not, because even though we just read that they had a registry of Kohanim that would be ritually fit and pure to perform the sacrifice, I don't know if something happened, but in 2024, Adam said that at that time there weren't. But then just a few days before we interviewed, this came out. A Kohen fit to perform the red heifer ceremony. The young Kohen in the photo visiting the red heifer candidates in Shiloh is fit to perform the red heifer ceremony. He came into the world via home birth and has never set foot in a hospital or cemetery, and therefore considered by halakha, Jewish law, to be of the highest level of Torah purity, having never contacted tumat, met impurity imparted by contact with the corpse. Should he opt to participate in the Temple Institute's ongoing preparations in anticipation of the renewal of the ashes of the red heifer, he will undergo intense instruction and training. Now, I don't know anything else about him. I don't know his name. I don't know if he was part of this practice that they did. It could be. I think it's likely. Based on what Adam said, it seems like he's the only one, unless they found somebody else, that would be able to do this. And so if they're doing a practice, maybe they're just trying to get down the procedure and they're trying to feel out exactly, okay, what are the hiccups? What do we need to What are the issues that we need to iron out? So maybe he wasn't involved, but maybe he was. Maybe we're getting really close to when they're actually going to do it. Maybe there is a heifer that's actually qualified and they just don't want to say it because they don't want to, exacerbate the situation, the anger surrounding this whole thing. So they found this Cohen. Okay, that was April 2024. And then August 2024, the article that we started out with in this video, Israelis practice red heifer ritual in front of Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that doesn't look like him. I don't think that's him. It's probably just some other Cohen. But okay, so now they're doing a practice after they found that Cohen. And then this is March of this year. Rabbi Ariel, he's with the Temple Institute. At this moment, it is not clear whether we have a red heifer suited for the ceremony. So he casts some doubt. This is him right here. There's videos on Adam's channel where he talks to him. So, okay, so he says that it's not clear. He casts some doubt that there are any red heifers that would be fit for the ceremony. And then Adam, the most recent development that I have, aside from this, is Adam saying that it's obvious if you go there that there's no candidate at this point. So if that's the case, I don't know. They're still pushing forward. I wonder if maybe they have other candidates that are in secret, but that would just be speculation. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, this is the furthest along that they've been in actually preparing for this ceremony. There's also been other issues. I talk about it with Adam in this video about like exactly where on the Mount of Olives they would do this, because he said it's not considered a sacrifice. According to them, it's not a sacrifice. It's a ceremony in order to get the ashes to purify Jews so that then they can ascend to the Temple Mount and do the temple services. But if I remember right, they're still trying to figure out exactly where on the Mount of Olives. There is somebody that owns land up there. And then there's just a lot of stuff to that, and there's other issues too. So all we can really do is just wait and see. Maybe for all we know, maybe things are all ready to go. Maybe the actual thing is going to happen in secret. Maybe these are preparations for it to happen, soon. And then one day we'll wake up and it'll have happened. Or maybe there are just tons of issues that they still have to work out, and maybe it's going to be a long time before they find another suitable candidate in a red heifer. So I don't know. I'm just going to keep taking note of these things. But that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.